Greetings and various assorted salutations. Welcome to, I believe this is the 8th entry of the Virtual Museum Development Diary. And today we're going to look at what goes into the actual design of the museum. Essentially, for the students who are ambitious enough to and curious enough to watch this, you might find out how I grade these and why I grade things the way I grade them. So, obviously, comments will be disabled. But let's dive into this. First off, for all the panels, even though it says Inventor's Panel, I use the same rubric for all of the panels because fundamentally there isn't that much difference beyond a few template different changes. Like for inventors, you list other inventions they have. For tycoons, you list businesses. For inventions, you give different information. So anyways, the first thing that comes up is grammar. And grammar is rated at these four criteria. Essentially, what we're looking at for grammatical errors is, even though we're looking for what I call museum quality, these requirements are very similar to what a museum might use to kind of set up their own panels. They probably don't use this rubric because you're dealing with professionals, whereas I'm dealing with students who are learning the norms of what you do and don't do for designing something. Anyways, so first for grammar, the grammar mistakes, it says no, but it can be minimal. Ideally, those students use what's it called? Spell check, that's the one. Spell check to fix things that are obvious. The blue squiggly lines, the red squiggly lines, they should be gone unless they're supposed to be there, like you're using a foreign word or something. And then I've got categories for editing required, extensive editing. I've entertained the idea, and I might do this at a later date, where I have a lot of panels that are pretty good, and if they just had a little bit more editing to them, they might be museum quality. But at the time of their turning in, they're just not quite there. And so I've entertained the idea of having an editing staff, which right now it's me, but ideally it would be some students running edits to fix things. The next thing is works cited. In the old days, when I first started the project, I used Chicago. However, students are very unfamiliar with Chicago manual style, and so I switched citation method to MLA, which they're taught. Most of the students, I believe, use EasyBib to do that. Gone are the days of when you had to cite everything by hand. I've had to do that on a few occasions. I know in grad school, one of the assignments I got was to cite things in different manuals of style that did not have an auto-citing program. Anyways, so you're going to see the same descriptors here. Going down to the template, the template one's very simple. If you follow the template to the letter, you're not going to lose points. Errors, frequent errors I run across is some people, their work goes into page 2, which it really can't, because the idea behind the panel is the first page of the document is everything that the museum panel is. There's other pages that follow that have like works cited, the student's name, etc., etc. But they're things that I'm not going to be putting in the museum panel. Because the museum panel, to make that deferred to Cal for Unreal Engine, one page is preferred. But sometimes students like to change font size. When I say like, I don't mean they usually mean to, but they do. That happens a lot. And that would put you in the 8-point range. Images, I try and make sure that the images are correctly sourced, relevant, and from public domain. However, in going along, looking at some of the citations, at some point what might actually happen is I get rid of the image requirement and it be based on whether or not I need an image in the thing. Because some projects, some things will actually have like a thing I make in Blender, or someone else makes in Blender, that has the object in itself, and so a picture might not be necessary, or a very specific picture. Like if we do a diesel engine or a gasoline engine, we might want a technical diagram as opposed to like a picture of a car or something. So I'm run kind of fast and loose with the images because push comes to shove. If I don't like the student's image, we can get rid of it and replace it with relative ease. This is the one that the students hate the most. 8th grade reading level, according to the Fleisch-Kincaid readability test. Um, Ideally, it's at 8th grade level or lower. Um, so if you get like an 8.9, technically that counts. This is one of those things I don't tell the students explicitly, or I will tell some of them. But if you read the rubric, there's actually a great deal of flexibility. So ideally, with an 8th grade reading level, I've explained this in other videos, is it creates the most accessible museum possible. That most people can walk into this museum and enjoy it. However, the reading level equation, I'm willing to be flexible on it, and so technically, 8th grade level is 8.9 or lower. Where you start to get into trouble is between 12th and 9th grade. However, if you run the numbers, technically you can get away with anything below 12, and at most you lose 2 points. Because I understand that. And this is not if you're in the editing required phase, that means you're not eliminated from museum entry. It just means that some work may or may not need to be done. Because there are some entries where you look at them and you're like, no, we do not need to lower the reading level for this one. It's fine where it is. So, because it's an equation, not some things read easier than you'd think. Some things, it's an equation. That's all this little readability test is an equation. Anyways, basic information. This is kind of the when, where, what, who, how many, where they were born, that information. Patent date, whatever it is on the template, it's whatever it is for the project you're researching, whether it's an inventor, a tycoon, etc. The basics are the things that you can answer them with like one word for each. Now, if the editing required appears here, you can see that the point values, sometimes editing required like only dings you a couple points because it's not that serious. But if there's inaccuracies with the basic information, I'm really going to have some concerns with it. And I don't give a lot of editing required for basic information because usually if it's inaccurate, it's going to be a reject. So that's kind of a warning. It's you either get the points in this one or you don't. I have the middle ground for wiggle room in the event like we have multiple patent filers. But usually if there's multiple patent filers, I'll just give the student a 10 and we'll figure out how to fix that in editing. Because some people invent something and then other people take credit for it. Yeah, anyways. The last thing is the 1 to 2 paragraph description of whatever the object, person, or place or thing is. And that's very specific. If you're a tycoon, if you're doing a tycoon, it's very specific. If you're doing something else, it's very specific. So this part's written as open-ended as possible, so I can only have to use one rubric for everything. It speeds up grading on my end, and students get it. It tells them, go back to the instructions and make sure you're reading them. That's kind of the idea behind that. So this is the basic grading rubric. There is one additional step. I can't show you it because that would be involving showing some early stages of student work. But one of the things that I also run is an originality report through Google Classroom. This is one of the wonderful features. Every time Google asks for feedback on it, I always give them very high ratings. But Google will essentially search through a document that you specify and say, this was pulled from here, this was pulled from here, or it'll say, nothing was pulled from here, or at least nothing too terribly obvious. It saves me time, and it really helps me understand where students are getting their information. And in some cases, I've caught several cases of plagiarism, copying and pasting. Mainly I look at it for the 1 to 2 paragraphs topic, because I get it. There's only so many ways you can say it was the fastest car in the world at the time. Things like that. But if it's like worst case I've had an entire paragraph plagiarized for a museum panel. That wasn't good. Of course, the irony is when you ran it through all the checks, it didn't pass the 8th grade reading level. And so, I mean, even if it was their work, it would have been problematic. And that's partially why I have the 8th grade reading levels. The idea behind the panel, and it's something that I'm trying to convey, is the idea behind the panel is it's the student's work. The student did the research and put together an original piece of information explaining this for use in a museum. That's the idea behind it. Theoretically, if you had a really motivated student or someone who's interested in this kind of thing, a student could say, this is a project I did in class, this is the product I made specifically, and this is my own work. This is a work sample of something I have done. That might become important as we move in education towards more project-oriented learning activities and learning in general. This kind of project could be used in a portfolio. You wouldn't talk about all the gaming aspects, you'd just talk about the museum design aspects. Because the idea behind this project is, for students at least, they're conducting research, they are presenting information in a standard format, and they're making sure that the information, while it is from other sources and there's properly cited, they are organizing the information in a way that makes sense for this project. Even if you never get into museum designs, if you're ever in the corporate world, this is important. Or if you have an issue you're passionate about in politics or community and you're writing something, this kind of little research presentation formatting thing might be immensely helpful. I could imagine this process helping somebody write a letter to the editor, doing a presentation at work, putting together a display, maybe not necessarily for a museum, but for like in a corporate setting. There's frequently a need for small, short writing pieces that are written a certain way. Learning to write in a template is important because life isn't always going to be in a very set template, but there will be a certain style of doing things. And I can't teach that fully. This isn't an editing course or technical writing course, but this U.S. history course, this virtual museum project, introduces the idea of there's a way of doing things, and there's a set way of doing things that will allow you to present information in a concise way that is efficient. So that's quite a long rant, but if you're interested, this little video kind of told you, well, this is how I grade it, and this is why I grade it the way I grade it. I expect a professional grade museum. It's a high bar to set, but students can rise to the occasion, and they have shown me they can do it. So, until later.